So Jackson from the Council Data Project, thank you so much for joining us. I am going to drop the link to your presentation in the chat, and you can go ahead and get started.
Awesome. Well, first, thank you for letting me come speak. I think I have about 20 minutes or so, and then we can have Q&A. I am going to talk about the project I've been running for a while called Council Data Projects. And it's similar in some aspects to a project that you all have called Councilmatic, with a few kind of tweaks and modifications that are very useful in certain applications, but they add a little infrastructure. But the kind of, if there's a subtitle to the project, it might be like, how can we make municipal council interactions and action and deliberation more accessible? And accessible there can mean a whole host of things, and we'll get into that in a second. So as a preface, hi, I'm Jackson. I use he or they pronouns. I am currently a PhD student at the University of Washington here in Seattle. I have led Council Data Project for about 5 years. And in this talk, I'm gonna talk about CDP. I'm gonna talk about some of the design decisions that we've made along the way while building the project, and kind of what just we're excited about building next. I will say, hold questions for the end. Normally, I would say interrupt and ask questions, but I think the structure of the talk should be good. That maybe I answer your question on the next slide. So with that, I'm gonna just give a brief tour of what CDP is, so that we can just kind of get into this right away. So this is Council Data Project. At a high level, you can kind of think of it as a search engine for council content. And so, let's say a hot button issue right now in Seattle is the idea of like housing, renters' rights, and missing middle housing. If I just type in housing and renters' rights, I can hit search and it will find me meetings that are hopefully relevant to that query. And we see a couple of things here. So, one, we see, just, video, or, well, these are cards or, links to videos. They hopefully have like a snippet from the meeting, from the transcript, that says like hopefully why this matched inquiry. They have the date, they have the which committee it's from, and so on. They have some keywords which may or may not be useful to what you queried, but they're relevant to the meeting. And you can, if you want to filter by which committee you're looking for, if you only want, the full city council, or you want a subcommittee or something like that, you can filter by date, all the normal stuff. But if I want to move into actually looking at the meeting, one of the things that we wanted to address when kind of building Council Data Project was, right, how do I get to the point in the meeting that I am interested in? I don't want to deal with scrobbling on the video timeline. I want it to be fast. And so, right, we can see right now that the query that I just typed into the general search has been passed through to this page, and we can jump right to any sentence in the meeting that kind of relates to what we're interested in. So this one looks maybe okay. Like, I would like to live in Seattle where everyone has adequate affordable housing. I want to look. This looks like a public comment, so I want to look at this public comment, and I can jump to that sentence right in the video. I don't know if you all can hear it, but it is playing the video, I promise. And if you're interested in looking at the transcript of this, you can also click the other button right there, and it will go right to that sentence in the transcript as well. And similarly, all these have points that you can just jump to. So the idea, right, is just like, let's make it easy to get to the point in the meeting that you're interested in. And once you're there, you can as well, just like YouTube or just like many other video sharing, you can share it at a time point. And I can copy this and make a new tab and paste it in. And when it's all done loading, it'll jump straight to that point in the video, into the meeting. Additionally, it looks like this meeting was literally just basically public comment. But if there's more content, you'd have kind of the full agenda. You have the transcript as I've shown. You have kind of the votes as well. And very quickly, I'll just pick a meeting that I know there's always votes in city council meetings, or in the full city council meeting. So I can look at this, and we can see, it looks like we have some appointments to a subcommittee or to an oversight committee. This was a council bill. CV stands for council bill. And we can see kind of like there was a presentation, there was a fiscal note attached, and so on. And all these things, right, these are just like PDFs that I can link out to and actually get all the content. Or I guess this is a docx that I have to download, but you get the idea. And if there's votes, right, we also have the full voting record, right? So in this case, it looks like all these were approved. And if we want to see like an individual vote, we can do that. And I'm very excited because I was going to stop there in this kind of high level overview of what CDP kind of does and is. But as of today, it just merged in. I'm going to switch to a different, just a fork of the project, and show that this is actually, because we can track all those voting records for every meeting, right? We can aggregate that into some sort of higher level, like person's voting record. And so this is the new kind of person page that will hopefully be deployed probably tomorrow by this time. And this is a person on the Seattle City Council who represents position 5 or North Seattle. We can see kind of they are the council president, or she is the council president. And this is like what committees they are chair, vice chair of, and so on. If they've sponsored legislation, it'll appear here. And then if you want to look at their full voting record, you can also look there. And all these meetings are linked out too. So if you want to look and see kind of the discussion about that bill and so on. So at a high level, that CDP is just like this, very much, just like Councilmatic, the project that you guys all have. It's an attempt to make council information and council access, easier and faster, with a bit more focus on kind of the idea of like, well, we can generate a transcript, and we can generate and process the video and all that stuff to kind of make that interlinking possible. So that is CDP at a high level. I'm gonna jump back into the slideshow now. And very quick running through that just as a TLDR, right? So what do we have? We have plain text search of past meetings and minutes items, right? So you can search for missing middle housing or bike lanes or whatever you want, and hopefully get returned back meetings that are relevant to that query. You can filter and sort, event and meeting item search results. So, date range, committee, etc. Every single sentence in that transcript is timestamped. So you can jump right to the point in the meeting. You can share at that time point in the meeting. And you get the full event details, right? That was that whole list of, this item came up, this bill came up, or this appointment packet came up, or whatever. And all the documents, presentations, and reports are all linked as well. So one of the things that we specifically focused on, and this is, you look at Councilmatic and you look at kind of the other, there's, I think, Councilmatic and Documenters, and there's a couple other tools like this kind of civic information access toolkit that I think you kind of lump us all into. And one of the things that we really struggled with was just the process of deploying. And this isn't, this is something that I think a lot of civic technology projects struggle with, is the idea of like, how documented do you have to make your repository or your project to make it be kind of the idea of like forkability, right? Like how easy would it be for the code for Portland or code for PDX to make the same kind of project that you have in Oakland? Or how easy would it be for Open Seattle to have the same project that Portland has, or something like that, right? And so one of the things that we thought about a lot was the idea of like which items in a project should be decentralized and which items in a project should be centralized. And we want to enable that decentralized control of kind of like, well, the Seattle instance of Council Data Project of CDP should be ran by Open Seattle, and the Oakland instance of CDP should be ran by OpenOakland. But the underlying tools, right, the front end web application, the back end processing pipelines, and the back end database, all the instances share those resources. So there's no reason to really decentralize those. And so to kind of work through this problem, what we've done is we've made a cookie cutter, which I'll go over in a second. But a cookie cutter is a Python package that can be used for JavaScript, can be used for YAML files, it can be used for anything you want. But it's really a template for creating an entire new repository, just an entirely new repository. In this case, we are using it to create an entire new instance of CDP. And so this single template will help you create a GitHub repository to host and manage and run all your pipelines. Because it's on GitHub and we use GitHub pages, it'll also host your deployment's website. And that's the kind of decentralized aspect, right? It's like we use this one tool to make your instance, and the actual like processing and web application code is centralized to our repositories, where we just say, if you want to solve a bug, if you want to add a feature to these, you just need to add that feature to CDP backend or to CDP frontend, and it becomes available to all the rest of these instances. And we think this is like a better, hopefully, we think it's a better route of kind of that, volunteer like management almost of like, if you're working on a hackathon and a volunteer from a hackathon is working on a project, and they wanted to solve a bug for Oakland or Austin or Boston or whatever it is, But Seattle doesn't have that issue. It doesn't matter. They're solving it for all those other places regardless, which is great. And so because of this kind of structure that we've laid out, it's very easy for us to deploy these instances. And so currently we have existing or planned. We have an instance for Seattle City Council, which you just saw. We have an instance for King County Council, which is the county that Seattle resides in. We have an instance in progress for Portland City Council and an instance in progress for DC Council. And this is so easy and so flexible, like the actual database model or the data model and the infrastructure is so flexible that we actually have an instance just for our own Teams meetings, just called CDP/self. So, if we generate transcripts and we have an agenda and stuff like that for our own team meetings. And I'll say, I didn't expect to use it as much as I do, but it's actually incredibly useful because when I'm talking on a GitHub issue, and I can just link to a time point in the meeting, in like our Teams meeting, where I say like, hey, we actually discussed this in team meeting last week. Go to this 35-minute mark, and you can see kind of the more full context and discussion about what we hope for this design or something like that. But additionally, one of the things that is really interesting about CDP, and because it's so flexible, is you don't have to have municipal council. And I think it's not too surprising to say like there's a lot of growing interest in following school board meetings. And one of the things that we could do, is deploy for the Seattle School Board or related kind of municipal councils that aren't at the same like IT infrastructure as a city council does or a county council has. So anyway, that's kind of the where we're at in terms of deployments. Very quickly, I want to kind of show that cookie cutter and kind of how what it looks like. So this is our cookie cutter repo. If you've ever used cookie cutter, it'll make sense, but if not, it may look a bit weird. All you really need to know is that anywhere you see these kind of bracket or squiggly bracket, that's a parameter for the template. And so when you run the template, it will fill in whatever value is provided to that parameter. And we have a list of all the parameters in this repository and kind of examples. So you might say, which municipality are you trying to make this repository for? And you get Seattle or King County as examples. What type of governing body? So city council, county council, etc. And a lot of these can be automatically filled for you, right? So the moment that you give us Seattle as a parameter, we don't want you to like have to deal with kind of the municipality slug, which is a very infrastructure like term for kind of management. So we'll lowercase that for you and handle that for you. And a lot of these are managed for you. So in the case of like which web, what's the web address going to be when you're all done? We pre-fill that with GitHub or with your username at github.io and so on. And the last thing I'll say on the cookie cutter is it has a lot of documentation. And one of the things that we always get asked, and I'll just say it right now, is what's the cost of running CDP? And so we have an entire section there on the README about that. Because one of the things as well is if this is decentralized and we aren't, we're saying, hey, like it's very easy to deploy these things, that's great, but it also should be low cost. We don't want to like shove cost on everyone else, and we understand that. And so the rough like total average monthly cost for Seattle has been about $33 a month for a while, which is about $1 a day, which we think is great. It actually is much lower for Seattle because we added a feature that says if you provide us the closed caption files, we won't actually generate a transcript. We'll convert from a closed caption file into our transcript format. And so the cost is drastically even more lower or reduced then. The last thing as well I'll say on the cookie cutter, if you're interested in looking at it, is I truly mean it is very simple to deploy a new instance of this. And one of the things we truly focused on was that deployment process. So we actually have two different methods for deploying. One is you can deploy just by making a GitHub issue in this repository. If you make a GitHub issue, we have a bot that will respond to your GitHub issue and will help you along with the process, and we'll help you along with the process as well. Or if you want to deploy under your own domain, right, then you can follow along with this cookie cutter, and we have a video as well. And that video is in total 16 minutes long. So it in terms of spinning up the infrastructure and spinning up the repository and the instance, it is a very short process to kind of get that going, which we've been very, very proud of. I'm going to quickly jump back as well. And I mentioned this before, but this idea of, right, by decentralizing kind of the instances, but centralizing the code, the kind of core components, we have hopefully made it possible to kind of contribute anywhere. So that's one of the hopes and kind of goals is this idea of, I think many of us who are here tonight really enjoy working in open source software, and you want to be able to say, I have contributed to like many instances, or I've contributed to many deployments. I've fixed I've added this feature to every single CDP instance, or I've fixed this bug for every single CDP instance. And so we've really tried to make that possible through our kind of deployment specification. And everything is MIT licensed. We are not a business or anything. Everything is open source. It's totally fine. And so I'm going to quickly jump into kind of what's next, just because I think that's kind of a really interesting part of like, okay, well, you figured out this deployment process. How can you add more features to deployments and stuff like that? So some of the things we're working on is right now. So I just showed that the individual person page, right, their voting record and their sponsored legislation and stuff like that was just kind of merged in today, and I showed the staging website for that. But another thing is legislation tracking. This has been a feature that was requested probably a year and a half ago or 2 years ago by a journalist. Just as like, I want a page just for a single bill where I can see the history of like the bill was introduced in this meeting, and then it made it out of meeting, it was discussed in full council, and then it was voted on in full council. And I want to see the voting I want to see the voting, the vote for getting out of subcommittee, and I want to see the vote for full council. I want to see the amendments that were merged in and all that process. So that's actually probably going to be released really soon. The design's complete. We already have front-end development in progress, so that's really exciting. That should probably happen within, I'm going to say two or so weeks, which is really, really exciting. Another thing that is probably our most requested feature ever. And I mentioned earlier that CDP doesn't really shy away from processing the data, right? Like we generate a transcript if need be, and we aren't afraid to do that because we think it'll help with the process of search and discovery of events and documents and stuff like that. Is speaker annotation. So the idea here is train a audio classification model to label every sentence in a transcript with the council member who said that sentence. This has been our most requested feature ever from journalists, from activists, just from the community in general. And I'm super excited to say, like, last week, I got an audio classification model that achieved like 96% accuracy. So I'm very excited to kind of keep working on that and hopefully deploy it within a month or so. At least kind of have the documentation for how people would train their own. We just started on working on a notifications stack, and I know a lot of the other kind of civic information access portals have this idea of notifications. But because again, we are kind of more on the like processing side, one of the things that I'm really excited about is alert me when this topic comes up again, or this keyword, right? Like if you're interested in, if you live on a street, and there's a very famous street in Seattle that had a lot of press about it a couple of years ago because they were trying to add a bike lane to it. And that's a divisive topic, apparently. It's 35th Avenue in Seattle. And, it'd be a really interesting feature to say, notify me the next time 35th Avenue is just mentioned in a meeting. Like, it's kind of this Google search alerts type of experience. The last one, which is just getting started, because we have this really interesting, honestly, data set of city council meetings, one of the things that would be useful to researchers, and I am myself a PhD student, is this idea of a cross-municipality API. So show me all the meetings in the Pacific Northwest or on the West Coast or wherever that discuss housing, and give me back this data set as this kind of more researchy use case as well, to kind of just get more people interested in what we're building. And so I'm going to briefly interrupt and say, you might say, okay, well, these are all things in progress. How, right? You've talked about the decentralized instances and centralized control of the core code. How do you plan on releasing these updates? And so we kind of overload the free GitHub services when one of those is Dependabot. So if you've ever gotten a notification on GitHub that's like, hey, there's a Dependabot security update. That's great. Like it's great to have security updates, but it is also very useful for just deploying changes to your own code base. And so one of the things that every single instance from the cookie cutter ships with is a custom Dependabot YAML, which says anytime CDP backend releases an update the next day, or sometimes on the same day, depending on when it runs, update our own configuration file. And so when something like that is released, a pull request is automatically made for the instance maintainer, and it includes, the changes that happened here, right? So this one, it was from 3.0 to 3.3 300 to 301, and it shows, you know, what is the release notes here. So we had released a hashing fix, and this was automatically made. I had personally already updated this instance, so it automatically actually closed the dependent pop request. But this is the way we actually plan on handling kind of these changes. And if there's kind of a breaking change, we also plan on kind of releasing, you know, binary scripts or bin scripts to help maintainers manage that process. I think I'm coming up on time, so I'm gonna very quickly wrap up and say, you know, we have a ton of stuff planned, and I would love input on just like what you all think and feature ideas and stuff like that. We have a lot in progress, as you can see from this kind of roadmap. I can make it bigger, but I think you also have access to the slides if you want to look in more detail. And I'll just quickly, you know, give some highlights. So this is a journalist that we interviewed a long time ago, probably 2 years ago, and actually showed the service to and said like, hey, you know, this is something we've been working on. Do you find it useful? And this is just, I think it's very interesting, the idea that the city, I would love to work with the city on this. And I think one of the goals, because we've constructed the project the way we have, is it doesn't have to be Seattle that we work with. It could be Oakland, it could be Boston, it could be DC. I would just love to work with a city's IT department in developing this kind of software. And I think you know, the way we've done it is kind of the best way to do that. Is just get a bunch of cities on it and able to work with it. So if you're interested, one, I would just say I would love comments and feedback and ideas and questions about the project. But if you are interested in contributing, you know, there's plenty of ways to contribute. You can deploy a new instance. You can develop just the core, you know, the CDP backend or CDP frontend. We have a ton of stuff that would need help with design. And I am, you know, struggling with project management. So if you are a project manager or product manager, you know, please reach out. And this is how you can reach out. So there's my GitHub, my Twitter, and the project's Twitter. And you can actually go to the website councildataproject.org, where you can reach out on Democracy Lab or just go straight to the GitHub, our GitHub organization. And we're at about a team of, I think, 13 or 14 now who work on the project from Seattle and other places. But thank you very much. I will, I guess, now take questions.
That's amazing, Jackson. Thank you so much for sharing this. It's a really exciting project, and obviously a lot of alignment, I think, with so much of what we do at OpenOakland. So thank you for that and for all the work that you put into it. It's super thoughtful. If folks have questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand or drop your question in the chat, and we can either read it for you or you can read it out. Nils, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, we were just in the chat, people were mentioning how amazing it is that the transcript option, the transcription is available. And so I've always seen services that are usually pretty costly. So you're saying that Google provides this and it's low cost?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, so I have spent a lot of time. I actually just put in, there's a 3.0.3 release of CDP backend that improved the transcription a little bit because we noticed it was failing a lot on actually land acknowledgements, because it was just, and so I had to put in some fine tuning. You know, Google has a sense of fine tuning the model, and so I had to do a little bit of changes there. But yes, to answer your question, so in the case that a closed caption file is not provided with kind of the event, it uses Google speech to text, and in general it's the most expensive part of CDP is speech to text. But if you are really only seeing a meeting a day, it doesn't work out to be too much, especially because usually meetings are about 2 or 3 hours long, and that's really, I think, the distinction is, I think a lot of people look at speech to text services and say, oh, this is very expensive because they plan on running speech to text a lot. Whereas really, we're only using it once a day for 3 hours or whatever it is, right? And that's, I think that's a huge thing. The other thing as well is, fortunately, because all of these meetings are most city councils that are in America follow Open Meetings Acts. One of the things that we can do with Google Speech to Text is we can just turn on data logging, which says, Google, you are allowed to store this data for your own training purposes. Because that's not right. It's public data, so we can just turn that on, and it reduces the cost by half. It just cuts the cost in half for speech to text. And it improves the model. Like that single button, like they give you a boost in performance and they cut the cost in half. And it's a very interesting, I don't know, dynamic. But yes.
And does every one last question in relation to this? Does every Zoom meeting have its own closed captioning, even if you don't? I mean, yes.
It's a very no. I don't know. So it depends on the council. So for Seattle City Council provides closed caption files. King County Council does not. And so we can actually very, very visibly see a difference in cost between the two. But it depends on, just what, really what happens on the back end is we run a cron job. So part of the instance deployment process is, right, when I said it takes about 60 minutes to deploy a new instance, I was saying it takes 60 minutes to kind of set up the infrastructure and deploy, set the website and all that stuff. But you, as kind of the maintainer, have to write a very simple Python scraper that just returns the latest events. And we run that on a 6-hour job. So just every 6 hours, it says, go get me the last 2 days of events, if there's any new ones. As a part of that return, if you return closed caption files, that's how we know, this event was returned, it happened 4 hours ago, and it has closed caption files, then we don't run Google Speech to Text. But in the case that, yeah.
Wow, thank you. That's amazing.
I have a question about, and I'll ask a quick question and then Felicia, pass it to you. I am curious, when you talk about the deployment and then getting the Python scraper set up, what kind of data input do you need to be getting from the city to be able to do this? Because I'm just thinking about our own city council meetings and commission meetings. They don't transcript them. You can get them, you can get the videos and the minutes associated with them, like the files, but they don't do the transcription. So I'm just curious if there's like limitations or constraints around how the data has to come in.
It's a great question. So it's a good question, and it's one we've thought about a lot, right? It is exactly the question of like, how flexible of a system can we be? And so we have a whole suite of documentation around the idea of what is our ingestion specification or our ingestion model. When I say you could provide the bare minimum, I truly mean it. So the bare minimum for providing, if you want to ingest a new meeting to CDP, this is the bare minimum, where you say what committee, we call the committee body, but you can say what committee was this? So full council, and you say, is it active or not? And then the sessions. So a session is, because one of the things we noticed during the pandemic was people were getting Zoom fatigue and they were splitting sessions or meetings into multiple parts. And so we said, okay, we have to have a session idea. But you could just say this meeting was one session long. In that case, you're really saying, what was the date time? What was the meeting, the time of the meeting? What is some URI to the video? So in this case, this is the videos for Seattle are hosted at video.seattle.gov. And then just what index in the meeting was this? So in this case, it's just the first, it's the 0th index. That is the bare minimum that you need to provide for a meeting, and the transcript will be generated for you. But that meeting, the meeting items and the votes, those are extra metadata from our perspective, from our ingestion perspective. And you can see all that information here, where we see, what are the event minutes items, and we can see here's, information item 1656, or minutes item CB 119858 or whatever, and it's a matter, and it looks like it was adopted. Here are our sponsors, right? So all that extra metadata is optional, is entirely optional. To get the bare minimum of, the video hosted and the transcript generated, you just have to provide this. When I upload our own CDP team meetings, I basically upload this plus a little bit of agenda metadata. I think I actually have one. I think I have it open. All teams. So I upload, reading of the agenda, organization, just like a high level update or description of like what that person discussed in the meeting. It's very, very simple. You can write, for CDP self or for our own team's instance, I'm just typing out these JSON files manually. But for the scraper, you'd obviously want it to be automated, right? You'd want that kind of city council data to be automated, but if you're manually entering it, that's also totally fine as well.
That's amazing.
Does that answer your question?
It does. Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you.
Awesome.
Felicia.
Yeah, I think I just unmuted myself. Great question, Jess. Thank you. I was wondering the same thing. My question is more kind of at the other end of things, which is feedback from the community. I'm just curious, how are you getting feedback? Like, how do you know? I heard you say, well, people love it. And that's like, everybody wants to create an app or a service that people like to use. So how do you know that people are using it and what they think of it?
Yeah. Okay. So again, another great question. So we have analytics on the. Actually, we just have analytics across the Google or the not Google. We actually don't use Google. We use plausible.io, which is a more like privacy centric.
Oh, interesting. I have to look into that. Thank you.
We store analytics across the entire councildataproject.org domain, and one of the things that's really cool about that is because because King County and Seattle are all hosted under the same domain, we can see who is using what instance all under the same kind of bucket. But additionally, one of the things that we've thought about, which would be interesting, is we haven't looked. We just don't have the team size to look into it. / we don't. And I will totally admit we do not have the kind of usage numbers I would love to see, and I'll totally admit that. But one of the things that I would hope to once we do have the usage numbers is kind of a Google search trends, because when you search an event, we store what you searched for in the URL in the query parameters, and so we can use that analytics data to say like what are people interested in council, which would be really interesting. But as a more general answer, a lot of the UX team is doing user interviews and user research, and that's one of the ways we're getting feedback. I think most notably, we talk to journalists the most. One of the people on our team, their wife, I think, used to work as a news director, and basically said like, "Hey, can you go message all your old employees and basically say like, what do you think of this?" And they had a lot of nice comments to say, but it's hard to get feedback. Yeah. One of the things that I would love to do, I've thought about this a bit, and I unfortunately at this time I cannot give like a 100%. I will be doing this, but one of the things I would really like to do is we are currently, myself and my advisor, my grad school advisor, are in an incubator to do parts of this work on sustainability and governance of the project. And one of the things that I want to do with the money that we got for like that grant or that incubator is actually form a steering committee where we say like we have 2 journalists and we have 2 activists and we have members of the community. Basically say like, we will pay you for 5 hours of meetings or whatever. Come give us, feedback, advice, or whatever you have. Really, just about the project. And another cool thing about that is because CDP is like you can deploy it in a lot of cities. Those journalists do not have to be in Seattle. They could be in Boston or in DC or wherever. Yeah. And we can get feedback from a much more wide audience than just Seattle, which I think is a really
exactly. Great. Awesome. Thank you.
That was it's really interesting. It's just it's so thoughtful from how you've approached the accessibility piece and what thinking about access, and both to the project itself, like to the as contributors, as well as opening up the actual information and making it more accessible to the public. We have time for a couple more questions if folks or comments. If folks are interested, you feel free to raise your hand or drop in chat. I kind of was curious. I actually wanted to ask a question about funding and because it does sound like you're sort of making use of any kind of Google discounts you can get, and trying to keep the project costs down. And it sounds like, and then I mean the idea of compensating your community input partners, or how your steering committee, that advisory board, I think it says a lot about making sure you're enabling people to participate and contribute and provide feedback who might not otherwise be able to give that time away. Which is, I know, something that we've sort of struggled with a bit ourselves. I'm curious, sort of, if you could talk a little bit more about how do you find those people? I know journalists are kind of easy because they're public, but like, what about people who like are just, you know, the average resident, so to speak?
It's a very, very good question. I'll talk very briefly on the general funding note, which is up until, or basically still right now, I am the primary payer of debts that CDP owes. I'm in a fortunate enough position to do that, and I understand that. But fortunately, right, we have tried to keep the cost as low as possible. It does not take a lot for me to pay the like server costs of CDP, which is great. We have that incubator funding, but I want to use that funding, which I want to use that funding for kind of exactly as you said, like bringing in people to really talk about it. And then we got money from Google. There's like a Google kind of academic grant program that gives about $5,000 to professors. And my advisor got some money there. But right, that is academic funding. That's not so much like maintenance funding. And so we're going to use that funding to backfill. We're trying to deploy in 5 different municipalities and backfill all of their data for 2021 so that we have a data set for academic use. So there's, you have funding for academic use and you have funding for kind of maintenance, and we're struggling with that dilemma right now a little bit. And yeah, it's an interesting problem. On the topic of kind of bringing those people in and how to find them, I'm sorry, I have to say I have a cop-out answer, which is like, we haven't done it yet, right? I hate to say that, but like, I really want to work on that problem, but I haven't had the time to do it yet, so.
Yeah, I've thought about that too. I mean, we have the same challenges, and I think it's really easy for open source and these kinds of sort of publicly oriented projects for us to default to assuming that people who we want to find us are finding us, and not really validate that assumption, and also making sure you're getting a real cross section, right? So that you're actually not just reaching a very specific group of people. So yeah, super interesting. I know Tom was bummed that he couldn't be here, but he had a conflict, but I'm sure you two will be able to connect. And if you need that follow up, let me know. I'm sure we'd be happy to get you both reconnected if needed, because I think there are a lot of really beautiful alignments with Councilmatic here. And I wonder how challenging or not it might be to sort of plug in one into the other, and what that might look like, but that's more a question.
I mean, one of the interesting things is, right, Councilmatic is, and I'll admit this because we haven't even started working on the problem at all, but Councilmatic is a better system for saying, notify me when this is upcoming. We have not started working that problem at all. And we recognize that. And it's actually, I think it's when we talk to activists, it's their biggest thing of like, I want to tell people that they need to go sign up for this notification, right? Like, and I get that. And so I think there's totally, right, like I think one tool serves one audience, like this archival researcher, and one tool like journalists, and actually City Hall. I actually have a lot of people I know at City Hall who use this, which is very interesting. But yeah, it's a totally different thing until we decide to take on that issue, basically.
Well, Nils, I know you have your hand up, but I just quickly, like Alina and Mike Ubel, who I think Mike is still, yeah, Mike and Alina, and Suzanne is here tonight, yes, on open disclosure, which is our campaign financing project, which is a kind of a similar concept in terms of certain data surfacing. They have an alert, like an alert email alert feature as well, and so. And I don't know if there's been discussion about integrating that into or having Councilmatic integrate that type of thing as well. I know we do social channels, and I think Tom said that they were working on email notifications next. So yeah, that may be a a feature, an adaptable feature.
Yeah, our notification system is pretty primitive. I mean, it just, anytime a new document gets filed with the Ethics Commission, we just send out an email, well, once a day. So it's not selective. I mean, it's not, I know Councilmatic has stated goals to let people sign up when they're interested in certain specific things. So, I mean, you know, other than a mechanism for sending email, I'm not sure that there's much in our stuff that could translate into that.
Yeah. Nils, you had another question?
Yeah, it just seems like Councilmatic is about the future, and this is about like what has happened, and so much of that can inform what you do in the future. They're definitely related, but different. And this even relates to open disclosure in the way that so much that gets discussed in city council and or anything else that you're referencing can affect how one votes or all that. I mean, it seems like they should all be networked, at least mentioned to each other, so that the voter has that kind of access to information to see like, oh, this is what they voted for. Like the fact that you separate out that one city council member who and how she voted, is like, that's just incredible. So I think, I just, it's mind boggling for me. So that's all. It's not really a question. I just had to kind of talk about it.
No, I think a lot of that, and this is, I'll try to hold a lot back. But this is exactly like my area of research in grad school is like trying to now take this really interesting infrastructure that we've essentially created and saying like, what can we do to kind of better understand, and specifically, right, you could say better understand, but it's also understand and give links to context, because a lot of data science problems struggle with the idea of like, oh, like we can analyze this large swath of data, but we recognize that this is political data. One, it has to be accurate. Like we do not want to make wrong claims. And two, if we do make a claim, we have to cite our source, right? Like we have to say, here's the link to this meeting where that person said that thing. Right, or whatever it is, and it's a very interesting problem space. And one of the things I'm super excited about, like besides the speaker annotation stuff, is which you can do a whole host of things there, right? Like you can say who is dominating the meeting, who is the one bringing up, like who is the one using the most like political rhetoric, like the most sloganing and stuff like that. But one of the things I'm very excited about is in relation to legislation or documents. Is let's say that a report is brought to city council, and and currently we have this already, right? You want to go to the meeting that report was brought to, but to even just reduce the extra click, right? Like right now, what you do is you're looking at their page for their legislation, and then you say go to that event page, and then once you're on the event page, you have to type in like that report's name and find it in the transcript, and we recognize that's already a laborious process, and a research problem that I'm actively working on is, can we just segment the meeting into the minutes items, right? To say, instead of making that link and then typing it in the transcript, right? Just create a link that already jumps to that portion of the meeting. Just reduce that friction again. So in the open disclosure area, right? If you have something that's like, hey, this new election funding bill was passed, right, or whatever, campaign funding, campaign financing, whatever it is, I don't want to have to scrobbling through the video. Everyone hates scrobbling through video. I want it to be a single click to like get to that point in what I'm interested in, and they totally should all be connected, and we recognize that. And it's like it is something that we are actively working on. In that long roadmap that I like briefly showed, something in there is about like, better linking and better information discovery and navigation. Yeah, totally.
And there's a flip side to that too, to the contextualizing, which is, and this was something that I've been really struggling with and trying to think about with regards to public data, is public comments, and what the transcript facet of this alone to me is huge, because what it allows you to do is actually perhaps like automate the extraction and compilation and analysis of public comments and sentiment and issue areas and concerns. And oh my God, that is huge.
There is. I'm very glad that you brought this up. I am currently actively writing a project proposal to do that. So there's a couple things you can do there. There's a really great study. If there's any academic literature I will pitch tonight, there is a really great study that was done on Supreme Court oral argument called Justice Interrupted. You can type in on Google Justice Interrupted and it will come up. And the long form of the title is Justice Interrupted, How Gender, Ideology, and Seniority Affect Supreme Court Oral Argument, right? So what they largely found was that, women are talked over, and even more so, even if the women were senior on the Supreme Court, they were talked over by the legal advocates, the lawyers that were trying the case, which is insane. That should never happen. And you could kind of do a similar study with public comment, or with, it's very common in city council meetings to have, the Department of Transportation, representatives from the Department of Transportation come and give a presentation about, exactly as I said, like the 35th Avenue bike lane in Seattle, right? They had numerous meetings come in and give presentations about that. You could see the dynamics between the representatives from the department versus the city council people who are kind of interrogating and deliberating that policy proposal. But additionally, right, that's just kind of the deliberation process. Exactly as you said, you could also look at sentiment and you could say, on a single bill, what is the sentiment about this bill from public comment versus what's the sentiment from council about this bill? Or a very interesting question that I'm interested in exploring is what is I'm going to say like the sentiment, the topical latency and the sentiment latency. So if a public commenter or a group of public commenters brings an issue to council, how long does it take for council to address that with policy, right? And
yes.
is there a difference in kind of how they go about it, what the context is about how they go about it, the language they use, right? Like, are public commenters more strongly opinionated than council, who's generally more administrative, etc. There's a whole I'm just like, this is exactly why I was super interested in this kind of project in the first place. Is one, it's a space it's a space for us to make a tool that is really useful to people. But also, if you deploy this in multiple locations, the data set becomes probably one of the coolest data sets for municipal governance research, just like ever. At least in my opinion, I hope I'm not hyping myself up there, but I really care about this. Exactly.
How would you judge sentiment? I'm sorry to jump in, but you had mentioned it, so I'm curious. Like, what are you pulling from the transcript that is like your sentiment markers of, the city council and or the public?
Yeah, great question. So, and to be what's the term? Like transparent. I haven't started on that project. I'm writing the proposal for it. And actually, I'm writing the proposal to give to a team that would work on it. I wouldn't even work on it myself. So it's kind of them. In my opinion, though, what you would do is you would first make a classifier that says, is this public comment pro or con about a bill, right? Generally, a binary classifier is pretty good nowadays, nowadays. And so that would be like a first attempt at, say, a majority of public comment were pro for this bill versus con, which is what the council went with. That's one way to do it. You could also do kind of the natural language processing methods of just saying, literally, is the terminology that they are using generally considered negative, right? So I do not like this bill is negative in comparison to we are going to approve this bill, which is possible. So I think there's both. You could do both methods. The best approach would probably be to do a combination of the methods. But there's obviously problems with that, right? Like we know that AI like sentiment analysis has problems, and we recognize that. And it's like, that's why I think I would rather start with a classifier that we have supervised control over than kind of just this AI neural method that could be problematic. So it's an interesting question, and it's one I'm interested in exploring. One of the things that as well that on that kind of AI ethics problems is because this data set is very right. We have a lot of accents. We have a lot of like literally it's a diverse speaking group. We can see that Google, if you have closed caption files, the transcripts are very good, right? Those closed caption files are produced by the city. Those are 99.5% accurate, whereas Google closed caption or Google speech to text is not as accurate as that. We understand that. We actually want to measure the word error rate, right? How accurate the transcripts produced by Google are. But one of the things that we noticed, and one of the things that we are interested in looking at, is where Google speech to text fails, right? Because one of the things that we saw, the reason that I pushed a patch that tried to improve Google speech to text, was that it was specifically failing on land acknowledgements. And it was failing in a way that it actually used really problematic language in place of the land acknowledgement. And this has been a phenomenon that's been cited, like been noticed in academic literature before, which is large language models, for some reason, will sometimes replace like Native American names with, I'm gonna say, rude and inappropriate words. And so we were like, that's not, like, we do not want that in transcripts. That's obviously wrong. We should try to work on this. And I think one of the things that we can do there is again, like, this is the speakers that come to public comment or just to council is a pretty diverse set. And because certain instances have closed caption files, we can kind of treat that as the ground truth and train our own speaker annotation or speaker speech to text models to have a better output maybe than Google does for like this kind of political administrative language. Because it's really surprising to see where it fails and how it fails, and it's shocking a lot of times. Fortunately, after kind of the update, I would say it's much better. It definitely still fails in parts, but it is much better. But yeah, it's something we're actively working on, and something that, like, I would love a team, just like 3 people who are interested in that problem, to say, like, great, like, we will work on this, right? Like, this is something that we'll work on. But until then, I think it's just gonna be like kind of this incremental improvements of just like, we found a better way to do this. We added one parameter or whatever it is and improved. I feel like I'm taking up a lot of time, so I'm gonna stop talking. I'm
gonna wrap us up, but I think that's a great note to end on. I think that this idea of the unintended consequences and the unexpected outcomes that we see from projects like this are a pretty wildly mixed bag, and sometimes it works out well, and sometimes sometimes it catches things that we need to catch. And so I so appreciate you sharing this project and reaching out, and I'm really happy that you were able to join us. Thank you. Can we give either a silent reactionary round of applause or an unmuted round of applause to Jackson? Thank you so much.